operator precedence and associativity. We'll extend our discussion of operators to discuss these two very important terms. But precedence and associativity, those again are some of those big words that describe things that are a lot simpler than what they sound like. So, big word alert. First of all, operator precedence. Operator precedence just means which operator function gets called first when there's more than one on the same line of executable code. And functions then are called in order of precedence. The higher precedence wins. So if I have more than one operator, the JavaScript engine will call or invoke the operator with the higher precedence first, or the highest, and then down the line from there. We'll see an example in just a bit. But before we do that, we need to add on one more concept that goes along with this. We mentioned it, operator associativity. Yeah, another big word alert. It's not as complex as it sounds either. Associativity. That's what order an operator gets called in. So again, we're talking about which operator function in what order. In this case, either left to right associativity, or called left associativity, or right to left, which is called right associativity. And this means when the operator functions have the same precedence. So if I have a bunch of operators on a line of code, the precedence tells me which ones gets called first. But if I have some of them, they all have the same precedence, then what do I do? Well, depending on the associativity of that operator, we're either going to call the functions left to right, or we'll call the functions right to left. All right, let's look at some examples. All right, so let's say I'm going to have another calculation here, and I'm going to say 3 plus 4 times 5, and output this. Now, what do you think the answer is going to be? Well, if you remember from mathematics class, there is an order, a precedence in mathematics in general to these operators, and JavaScript does the same thing. Because there's one of two options. These are two function calls. And remember, JavaScript is synchronous, so it's not going to try to do this simultaneously. It's going to call one and then call the other. But which one gets called first? Well, first of all, we'll start with operator precedence. And in order to answer this question, we need to know what the operator precedence is in JavaScript. There's a terrific link, which I'll provide in the next lecture, on the Mozilla Developer Network, or MDN. That's developer.mozilla.org, called Operator Precedence for JavaScript. And it actually has a table of operator precedence. What I've done is taken this table and provided you a PDF, which you can download. It's attached to this lecture for download. And we'll use this PDF to discuss this. So, again, remember that what's happening is these are two functions. Operators are special types of functions, and so the one with the higher precedence gets called first. So the bigger the number on this table, that means the one with the biggest number will get called first, and the second biggest number will get called second, etc., until all of the operators are done. So if I go down to this section of the PDF, to explain what these little symbols here mean, this is the operator. There are a large number of operators in JavaScript. You can see them all in this PDF. And these 3 dots just mean other code around it. So in this case, multiplication is a asterisk, division, addition, subtraction, remainder, and then there's just code around it. So a left parameter and a right parameters. So these are the parameters being passed to that function. So in my sample, I have multiplication and addition. Notice that multiplication has a precedence of 14, and addition has a precedence of 13. And And with operator precedence, the higher one gets called first. So multiplication is higher, or has a higher precedence than addition. That means that what's going to happen is this will get called first. And remember that this returns a value. So what's really happening is 4 times 5 is run. This operator function is invoked and returns 20, 4 times 5. And then, because this has the lower precedence, this is called using that returned value as the second parameter. And so that's called, and it's 23. Equals is also an operator. And essentially what we're doing is setting a equal to 23. If the precedence was different, then it would do 3 plus 4. If that was first, that would be 7, and 7 times 5 is 35. So we'd end up with a as 35. So the precedence makes a big difference in the value we get. 23 if times or multiplication has the higher precedence, and 35 if addition has the higher precedence. But we've already seen that multiplication has the higher precedence in JavaScript. So when I run this, I get 23. I get 23 because this function is called first, and I get a 20. And then this function is called, and I get a 23. Make sense? That's a very important concept to understand some of the strange bugs or things that look weird anyway that can happen to people when writing JavaScript code. Now, what if more than one operator, and I could have many in a row, has the same associativity? Let's go back to our table. Notice that in some cases, for example, multiplication, division, and remainder, all have the same associativity. Or I could have the same operator on one line of code. Well, let's take a moment and look at this. I'm going to change what I'm doing here. I'm going to say var a is 2 and var b is 3 and c is 4. So I now have 3 variables with 3 different values. And then I'm going to run a statement. A equals B equals C. And then I'll console.log all of these 3 variables. All right, let's look at this. I have 3 of 3 different values, and then I'm setting A equal to B equal to C. So in the end, they should all be equal, but the question is, what value will they all have when I console.log this? Will they all be 2? Will they all be 3? Or will they all be 4? What do you think? Take a look at the results when I refresh. They're all equal to 4. Why? Because of associativity. That's this column here in the table. Associativity is either left associativity, meaning the furthest one to the left, the furthest operator to the left will be called first, or right to left, or right associativity, meaning the operator furthest to the right will be called first. And that's really it. Pretty simple. All right, so the operator I'm using is the equals operator, or the assignment of equal. That's one of the assignment operators. Notice that its associativity is right to left. So the equals operator is right associative. It has right to left associativity, meaning that when I have it on a single line, since it's the same precedence, it then looks at the associativity to decide which one should be called first. So it goes to the furthest one to the right because it's right to left associativity. So it'll call this one first. If it was left to right associativity, it would call this one first because that's farthest to the left. But no, it's right to left, so this is furthest to the right on this line. And so it calls this. So it will set B equal to C. And what is C? 4. Now, here's the interesting thing. We said that operators generally take two parameters and return a value. So the plus operator returned the value of the addition of the two parameters. But what does equals return? All right, let's go back to our console window. I'm going to set B equal to C. So it will run this operator, and the console window will show me the return value. See, the method or the function called was invoked. It did the work of setting the value in memory of B equal to the value in memory of C, and then returned the value of the parameter on the right, the parameter that we're setting equal to. So it gave me back a 4. So this statement actually returns a value. It's a function that returns a value. So that means I can call it in order. So since this is right to left associativity, this is furthest to the left, this is furthest to the right, this is called first. It sets B equal to 4 because C is 4 and returns a 4. And then this will be called. So A will simply be set equal to 4 because that's what this returned. A is 4. So when this is done calling, first this operator, then this operator against the returned value, A, B, and C are all equal to 4. Make sense? That's operator precedence and associativity. Precedence helps us determine which functions run first, and so does associativity. Associativity comes into play when two or more operators have the same precedence. So if an operator has precedence 14 and another one 13, 14 gets run first. But if they both have 13 or some other value, then it's either left to right or right to left. And we can see this in action if we go back to our original example where we said A was equal to 3 plus 4 times 5, like that, something like that. So this ended up being 23 because precedence said 4 times 5, 20 plus 3. But notice in our operator precedence table, what's at the very top of the precedence table is called grouping. And that means I can put something inside parentheses. That's our special operator in this case. And unlike some of these other operators, it simply takes whatever's inside of it and says, run this first. So whatever's in the parens always gets executed first. Those functions get called first. So if I put 3 plus 4 in parentheses, now what's going to happen? Well, JavaScript looks and sees that parentheses have a level 19 highest possible precedence, and so runs this function that's inside of it first, the plus. And then the 3 plus 4 is 7, and we'll then multiply that times 5. So if I run this, I get 35. Without the parentheses, the precedence rule says, well, this has a higher precedence than plus, and so I get 23. With the parens, it changes the order that the functions are executed, and that's all it's really doing. So, operator precedence and associativity. You got that? This is important again because JavaScript is dynamically typed, and we'll see that very soon.